As you might be able to tell, I recently got quite sick, and that left me with a lot of time. And in that time, I decided to make this. So we start off the build here looking for just the right body. Thankfully, just the right body exists because Grofy Bruce actually made this mod for us years ago, and it has the perfect wheelbase for us. We've got a steel panel material, a ladder chassis, steel chassis material. It is a front transverse. It is a front double wishbone-ish kinda setup, and a rear leaf spring. The engine in this truck is a 1996 Ford 460 or 7.5. It is a pushrod V8 that has a plethora of displacement, not a lot of technology, but it is at least a multi-point fuel-injected engine, and it does have a more modern computer system on it than the truck would originally have come with. There's some things that we can't replicate exactly, but it's pretty darn close in automation. It should be making in the neighborhood of 400 foot-pounds of torque and in the neighborhood of 250 horsepower. That sure doesn't sound like a lot of horsepower, but these motors are all about pulling, and with the gear ratios available, which is the main reason that we went for this engine, is a more modern 5-speed manual transmission with an overdrive and a granny low gear. That gives you a wide range of torque band to use, and you can haul some heavy stuff. Ford loved their dual throttle bodies in this era. I didn't go for the twin intake, however, because those are much more tuned for sport in-game, so we went for the single throttle body just with a large intake manifold, and we were able to get close enough to the performance of this engine that we shouldn't really notice any major changes between it and the real deal. I have this one set to rev out a little bit higher, but really these engines are pretty much done at 4,500 RPM. You want to run them lower than 4. Somewhere in that good sweet spot of 2,000 to 3,000 is where this truck does all of its work. Picking the year for this is a little bit of an iffy situation, but we did a 67 Ford F-250 ramp truck named Jesse. As we start modifying this body just a little bit, obviously this was a body that was made for this era of truck, and this era of truck didn't have that much stylizing to them. It's not too difficult. This truck is named Jesse, by the way. I picked that name because the day that I went to pick up this truck was actually the day that Jessie Combs lost her life in a horrific land speed racing accident. And that was something that really impacted me. I thought she was a tremendous personality, and I was pretty saddened by that, and I wanted to immortalize her spirit with the build of this truck. I was very excited about the build of this truck when I first got it, and it was by far the biggest project I've ever undertaken, and I like the fact that it is immortalized with a name like Jessie, and the truck has a nice fitting memorial to her on it that we will try to include in the build later on. Currently, we are trying to fiddle with some mirrors that don't really exist in any of the mods or standard fixtures in the game. So I went ahead and used some 3D fixtures to make some tubes to try to make this basically tripod setup that holds the mirror in place. It's not perfect by any means, but it's certainly a lot closer than any of the default fixtures ended up being. I see a lot of trucks like this with huge tow mirrors on them that are bulky and oversized, and I certainly see the advantage to it, but because I don't ever tow trailers, I don't feel the need, and I like these smaller form mirrors. The front end of this truck poses the biggest challenge. Sure, it's not overly stylized, but the actual headlight design and grille design and everything like that does not exist in the fixtures of the game, so we have to go pretty much completely custom, and as far as the headlights and their shrouds go, there's a lot of give and take there. I can get close-ish, but the actual formed piece that is the headlight surrounds is a super complex set of curves that you would have to actually go in and 3D model to properly represent. So we're going to just do the best we can here on automation, and I think we end up somewhere close enough that it's recognizable without being super gaudy, or I don't know. Basically, I just want them to be so over-designed that they drew too much attention, so I kind of just tried to hide them in there with the grill design. This is kind of one of those areas of a build like this where somebody with some actual 3D modeling experience could excel far greater than me, but I really do enjoy challenges like this where you're basically trying to build a Lego kit that you didn't get all the pieces for. You gotta make do with the pieces you got to try to represent something that exists in real life, but you don't have the pieces for to try to replicate exactly. It's a fun challenge, if not a little frustrating at times. Even the bumper, nothing in the automation universe is exactly like the bumper in our truck, but there's plenty of options that are close enough that can trick the eye. And thankfully, there are a set of these, I don't know, I call them buttresses that go on the front that are basically perfect. Another area that really frustrated me is the hood bump. I could actually get this complex 3-tier hood bump to work with fixtures, but they would never work wrapping over the curve on the front of the hood. They always clip into the body because, this is my basic understanding, basically the hood has more polygons than any of the fixtures that I'm trying to use, and because of that, the fixtures can't wrap the hood contour perfectly because there's just not enough polygons to go around, so they always end up dipping into the hood. So what we end up settling on is something a little bit more simplistic, but carries with it the basics of that hood bump. Now we're going in and using some of the new features of automation where you can basically insert your own custom images. I went out and took a bunch of pictures and references of stuff on the truck so that we could put it on our in-game truck using this new feature, including the Ford badges on the front, as well as these F-250 badges that go along the side. There's some other things that I took some pictures of. I tried to do a little bit more, but not all of it worked perfectly, but I'm happy to have that feature to add some personalization touches. Windshield wipers continue to be the bane of my existence in this. I don't know how to fix this. Like, I don't know if there's something that they can do to make it work a little better, but as of now, it's still just a total nightmare, and they never quite look right. And speaking of that, we move to the interior, which is probably not my strong suit, but I'm actually pretty pleased with what we came up with here for an interior. There was some give and take on some details, but the amount of mods that have come out with fixtures for the interiors really helped out a bunch here. We were able to get most everything to give us the basic details of the dash, the door panels, and the seat, as well as some great mods that help you finish out the interiors, like the floor tub and stuff like that. It makes it easy enough that I was willing to make this interior decently detailed. I decided more for it to be detailed for automation. It may not look perfect in BeamNG, but I think the compromise is worth the result. It's funny, a thing like the interior of this truck, it's so simple. Like, when you sit in it, you feel like you're in the olden days because everything is so simple in there. However, all of the shapes are actually quite complex. There's a lot of curves that meet each other, so there's a lot of scalloped pieces, and those are the things that are, for me, really difficult to represent in 3D modeling, especially when you're got a little bit of a limited toolkit in your 3D modeling. I was particularly happy with how the door cards and the tubs and the seat and everything like that worked out. There's enough detail in there that I don't know, it tricks the eye, I guess you could say. It's the best that I was willing to spend the time to do, and it's by far the best effort that I've been able to make as far as creating something that looks lifelike. The floor tubs in particular were a lifesaver. They made this whole process so much easier than it used to be. Fun fact, the bench seat in Jessie is actually out of a van. I know this because when you lean the seat forward, there's ashtrays in the back of it. And it is of the era that was a commonplace. However, there was no club cab version of these trucks, nor would there have been a version that had any kind of accoutrements like that, for sure. So it is certainly, much like the rest of the truck, just parts scavenged from other vehicles. I'm sorry to say I did not add the detail of the ashtrays in the back of the seat, though. Now we start to move into the real fun part of this, and that is the bed. With just a little bit of modification to the chassis, and thank you, Grofy Bruce. You did an amazing job with this mod. So much of this truck is configurable, and that's exactly what we need to be able to do something like this. Now I went in here and tried to make the bed basically in the same way that the bed was made. Ramp trucks are a thing that have existed for a long time, and there are companies that specifically make ramp truck beds. Ours, however, is very much so homemade. So even when I was trying to build it out with fixtures, I was trying to do it in kind of a similar way and an overbuilt way that they did. So you might see a overzealous use of fixtures here in some places that might seem overkill, but trust me, it's probably actually underkill compared to the real life version. One of the biggest challenges is doing the wheel arches and everything like that, because it's a pretty unique setup there back with the arches going into the bed. Most ramp trucks, they put the bed high up above the wheels. Ours, they scalloped it out, and I really appreciate that because it makes the approach angle to load vehicles on it a much easier task. And also, when you're loading a vehicle, you have to go up over those wheel arches, and it actually helps you kind of rudimentary lock the car in place before you get it strapped down. There are a ton of different ramp truck designs out there. Wedges, dovetails, rails, where it's just two rails that go up it and there's nothing in the center. There's Hodges beds, which are kind of the real deal, if you will, and then there's homemade ones like this one. I'm pretty happy with the bed that we ended up with on my truck. I think it's a very good compromise. It is a little bit on the short side, and for that reason I actually went in and purposely made our bed in this in-game representation a little bit longer, because I do want this to be a working BeamNG mod, and I want people to be able to use it and load kind of any vehicle they want, versus me in real life. I'm pretty limited to just cars. It fits my 240SX perfectly. If it was any longer, I would be in trouble. One thing that I do wish we could do in automation, maybe you can and I just don't know how yet, I wish you could run different wheels front and back, because I do run different wheels front and back. I've got some nice center lines in the front and then like a standard steel D-spoke wheel in the back. But for our case here, we are just gonna kind of meet in the middle and run just a generic steel wheel front and back. The fake dually setup, I end up finding something better later on, but that's just kind of an early thing just to help me space out the wheel wells and all that. Doing a lot of work here trying to get the side rails and side panels all in a pretty authentic way. It is all very rough cut metal in real life, and I'm trying to treat it that way here in game as well. The headache rack as well, it's super overbuilt. In real life, it's actually quite curved, where many vehicles over the last 50 years have probably bumped into it in loading and stuff like that. in-game and this fake representation of it, you know, we'll make it nicer. We'll make it nice and flat and true. Headache rack ends up being quite a bit of work. There's a lot of pieces to go into this. There's some like double walled lip situation, and then there's of course these little bit of again, I'm going to use the word buttress situation off the side of them. I think it's a really cool looking rack, actually. I'm pretty pleased with the aesthetics of it in real life, and I'm pretty pleased with how it turns out here in our automation version. At this point, I'd like to do a little shout out to NetBlitzer. He's working on a mod for automation called the Advanced Fixture Control mod. And what it lets you do is basically move pieces as a group. So you can do like a shift control and click through pieces and put them in a group and then move all those pieces as a group. Gives you a lot of flexibility when you're doing weird stuff like this and you're stretching automation beyond the controls that they were really intending you to do. It's going to be a pretty cool mod. I think it's soon to be released, but I believe you can download it now as a beta release, but it's pretty great. Helping out a ton here, building these rails, these little square tube rails. The square tube rails actually gave me a little bit of insight into the construction of the bed of this truck. I was curious as to how that all lined up, and as it turns out, these rails, I was struggling to get it all to line up because the real life version, they are quite bent in. The sides of the headache rack actually bend in very roughly, very crudely. So I had to do some modification to the headache rack just to make it suit these side rails. This is how I think it probably should be built in real life, with the lines being nice and straight and true. So that's the way I decided to do it here. These little side rails are basically for nothing. They are a little visual aid to the truck. They help you not walk off the edge. I don't know. They're not structural. You can't really tie down anything to them. They help me when I'm using the truck for like carrying just general cargo or making a trash run with the thing. But as far as loading cars, they're not very useful at all. Now I'm trying to finish out these wheel wells that bump up into the bed. They were a little bit of a challenge, but there ended up being pretty much all the pieces that we need. I ended up doing a little bit of modification to these later because we needed them to be wider. It is a very small gap. The dualies on this truck fit into those wheel wells perfectly. I ended up using the rear wheels off of the 96 parts truck on the rear of the truck to have a more modern tire and size wheel on there, but it fits. I'm telling you, you couldn't get a baseball card in most of those spots. It is really tight. Also added some cool details like this toolbox off the side of the bed and the winch, as well as some tie down points, some anchor points on the bed so that you can, oh hey, here's where we fix the dualies. I found the mod that replicates the actual wheels on the truck. So yeah, I've got 4 basically D hooks on the bed to help tie down the car, and we will have that on our automation version as well. I thought I had a mod that like kind of represented these D hooks accurately, but I couldn't find it. So I ended up just making some that are quasi-realistic, you know, just kind of a vague representation of what they are. They're not going to actually do anything for us in BeamNG. Hopefully there'll just be some nodes around that we can hook to. I really do hope that we get in BeamNG someday actual like ratchet straps and tie down straps and stuff like that. I think that would be a super cool feature for, say, doing a, what's it called? RPing. That's what the kids call it these days, right? Doing some RPing in BeamNG. Now I'm working on the rear panel of the bed, which is a pretty unique piece, actually. I went ahead and put some dummy ramps up in there as well. but there's actually a little cutout piece on the bottom of the rear sail panel, if you will, that is suitable for a ball hitch, so had to go ahead and put that in and put a hitch on it, so maybe we can tow a trailer with a ramp truck. It's not something I ever want to do in real life, but I might want to do it in Beam. Taillight situation on the back, super simple. It's just two round, basically, trailer lights. It does not have reverse lights, although that is something I would like to put on someday. Didn't have an exact plate like the one that I have on there, but I figured the best match is going to be a Michigan plate, because this is a made in Michigan Ford. Probably? I mean, who knows? There's so many pieces on this truck. You could say it's been made in probably most of the East Coast of the United States. And there is that ball hitch that I was talking about. So I just kind of hid the hitch mod, or the hitch fixture, on that little plate. And then adding some details to the bed, like it's got some little caps over it. It's got some little corner lights that I added to it. And I'm also going to go in and use the decal mod. It's not really a decal mod, but basically the ability to add images as textures in game. And I found some vague diamond plate texture to use for the rear deck as well. The little fuel doors, not exactly like I have them in real life, but they're close enough. They're within reason. And the tailpipe situation, I ended up with something that I think looks pretty authentic. There's a nice slash cut exhaust pipe that works out perfectly for us. And some finishing touches here. I actually had the raw image of the Jesse decal that we have on the truck, and I was able to put it in game. So now we're going to start refining some of these details on the truck, including the gear ratios, which is something we can do to a higher degree now. If you go to the advanced mode, you can actually change the gear ratios in every individual gear. Now by default, this actually shows you the speed per gear, but if you click over here, you can toggle to the ratio, and you can more finely tune that. Now on Jesse, we still have the original 67 rear axle on that truck, which interestingly is not actually a dually axle. I am running dualies on a regular axle on the back. It is an open differential. It is not a locker or anything like that, as much as I would like to have one. It's not what we have. And it is also a ratio that is not perfectly tuned for the ZF5 transmission we have in there. I do believe it is a 363 or somewhere in that range, so 364 will be close enough. But the gearing, I do have the list here of the gears for that transmission. And first is actually what you would call a granny gear, or sometimes referred to as a half gear, crawling gear. It is a very high ratio. It's a non-synchronized gear, but it is just to help you get going on a hill or whatever. But usually you can start the thing in second gear. And that is a 5-7-2. So that's a lot of ratio, a lot of torque multiplication in that first gear. Then we hop to a 294, which is still, I mean, it's not the highest first gear that you could ever have, but it's something that's closer to what you would think as a first gear, even though it's second. So then we had a 162, a 1, so fourth gear is your locked here, your 1-to-1 ratio. And then fifth gear is overdrive, so that's a 0.76 overdrive, combined with that rear ratio, which it might actually be lower than 363. Memory kind of failing me on that one, but it'll be close enough for our purposes, and honestly, it'll probably be better if it is. We would love to put like a 410 or something like that in the rear end of the truck, but with that overdrive, it's a pretty low RPM. Tire-wise, we've got a 225 on the front on a 75 sidewall, and the rear a 235 with an 85 sidewall. Now, obviously, automation does not actually have dualies. You saw me put, the fake dualies in there. It is possible in BeamNG you could do some JBeam editing and probably run dualies from Beam on this truck. However, it's not completely necessary. We should be able to get this thing to work just fine with its 4 actual tires and the other 2 just being for show. Brake-wise, we did a lot of brake work on our truck, but it's still not super modern. Up front, we have a 2 pistons. It's actually not a solid disc. It is a vented disc. So I may need to bump our year up on the truck, which would mean I'd have to go back to the chassis options to do that. Because, yeah, we do have a vented rotor up front. It is a more modern setup than a 67. In the rear, we do still have the standard drum brakes, and they are actually pretty small drum brakes in the rear. They are not the big camper special drum brakes or anything. It's always kind of tricky to figure out what year to make something like this because, yeah, the chassis is a 67. It was modified and who knows when. It's got a 96 engine in it. It's got brake parts off of every year imaginable. So what year is this truck? Yeah, it's a real ship of thesis, this thing. But we'll get those vented discs on the front, and that should be good enough for now. Aerodynamics don't exist. Interior is as Spartan as you could have. And actually, can we put an FM radio in this here? Or no? No, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. Driver safety, none. And it does have a manual recirculating ball steering rack. It does not have a racket pinion. It does not have power steering either. I've got it set to optimize weight all the way heavy. And on the suspension, we have standard springs and gas monotubes on it. It does actually have load helping springs on it, especially in the rear, but we'll just make up for that with a very high rear spring rate. We may have to go higher than this. Won't know until we put a car on there. And then it has no sway bars. So, like I was hinting at earlier, the front suspension for this truck doesn't exist in automation, nor will it ever, because it's very Ford specific. It is a twin I-beam setup, so there's 2 large I-beams going transverse in the vehicle, not front to back. The I-beams are going transverse, so it's not like a Mopar with, big tension rods going back or anything like that. It's just 2 independent I-beams for each wheel, and in this year they did not have a sway bar front or rear. Pretty prone to getting pulled around on the road, pretty prone to body rolls, stuff like that. But debatably, it was better than a pure solid axle up front. Debatably. I set the ride height pretty low. I think Jesse actually rides a little bit lower than this in real life. However, we do have the restrictions of a video game here, is where I just feel like in Beam we're gonna need some travel on that suspension for it to behave correctly. And I do think once we put a car in there, it's gonna settle down. So currently it is coming in at 3,803 pounds. I feel like that's light. We weighed in with Red and some of my stuff on there too, but we weighed in at 9,000 pounds rolling, and Red weighs about 2,500 to 2,700 pounds. We haven't weighed it since some stuff has been added, but I would say it's no more than 2,700. Combined with what I would say was potentially like 300 pounds of additional stuff on there, I think Jesse is probably rolling down the road at closer to 6,000 pounds without a car on it. Now, are we going to be able to get it to weigh that much in automation? I am not sure. There are some tricks I can do to try to add some weight to it here and there. I believe if we actually lower the quality here, let's bring that up. There's our number. I think we lower the quality on things like, yeah, the safety and interior stuff. We can actually increase the weight that way. And this shouldn't affect the driving of the vehicle at all. Weight distribution won't matter, but how about quality? We could also increase the safety. These are things that matter in the world of building cars and automation for stats, but for our purposes of just trying to replicate something in real life, probably not so much. If we could get this thing closer to 5,000 pounds, I would feel like it's more accurate. So through the effects of doing some quality movements, and we'll see how that affects it in BeamNG, but overall, we are at 5,000 pounds. So 5,000 pounds was about the most I was able to get towards it. Someday I would like to roll Jesse across the scale again and see where it's at with just the truck on there. Maybe without humans, without fuel, without tools and stuff. Maybe it is closer to 5,000, but I've seen the construction of that bed, and it's heavy. All this stuff, honestly, I feel like I probably went a little thin because the walls of just the skirt on the bed are double thickness, like they've got 2 sheets in there. This corner piece here is a solid chunk of angle iron all the way down it, and that stuff is all braced underneath with angle iron, and it's covered in thick diamond plate. It's a heavy, hefty bed. All right, I think it's time to go ahead and give a first stab at looking at this thing in BeamNG, seeing if it's anywhere in the ballpark. I know that we're going to have to do modifications to the bed because none of this stuff that is added on will be solid in BeamNG. That used to be the case. I'm kind of disappointed that that changed, and you can no longer export vehicles with solid bodies based on fixtures, but there are workarounds to that. You can modify the J-beams, and we, with some help from NetBlitzer, should be able to get this bed to be realistic. Oh, I just noticed we got a little bug right there. We got some posts popping through. All right, now we'll get it exported, and let's see what we have here. I'm just gonna throw a car on the bed. We can get it back there. Like, it will rest on there. We've done it in the past. Sure, we had to, you know, take the cars off ramps and jump it onto the bed, but you can do it. And we'll just see if the suspension is up to the task. All right, here we go. Let's see what kind of disaster we've created. All right, that's not too bad. Looks like some of the textures maybe didn't come in. Let's, here, let me hop out of the truck. I think that's actually just shadow. Looks like the textures did come through. I think I want to change that front bumper to be chrome or match that at least. It looks like it's maybe coming through as like a steel. Looks like the brake lights are probably on right now. No, actually the textures look pretty good. I'm impressed by that. I think it really does kind of look the part. Feels a little loud. Hold on, can we? Oh, no, I guess I don't have my pedals plugged in. Let me use a controller. Oh, of course it. I'm not in the truck, that's why I can't accelerate. Currently, there's a little bit of a bug going on with automation exports and the windows, so we're kind of just dealing with these a little bit of foggy windows at the moment. Great that the decal came through, though. There's obviously some things I'm not 100% thrilled with, like the headlights, but overall, it's pretty good. That is as close to Jesse as I've ever come. So, I mean, other than in real life. So let's go ahead. Okay, I need to fix the camera. Looks like the gauge cluster could use some fixing too. Okay, all right. Let's go ahead and try to drop a car on here, and let's see if it will hold it. I think we'll naturally go ahead and load in the 200BX, which is clearly not a 240SX, and I've clearly not made a clone of that. Alright, so we're going to do this a little bit on the rough side. Here, let me actually turn the volume down. And we're just going to, like, try to F7 drop this thing from the sky. Maybe a little far forward. Oh, missed. Well, it is not even remotely on there yet, and I already see it hitting the ground, so that's not a very good sign. Alright, let's try to move it this way a touch. Okay, like I said, the bed's going to be basically non-existent. It's just going to be riding on those frame rails. So let's see if we can drag it forward. No, we'll need to spawn it forward a bit. All right, so how about here? Ouch. I mean, it's not helping that it's carrying so much weight rearward. But it really just wants to slide back, doesn't it? All right. Forward a little bit more. Okay. Can we potentially give that an insert? No, it's going to bring the car away. Okay. There we go. There we go. That's pretty close. It looks like we do indeed need a little bit more spring in the back. That nose is coming up a good bit, and the wheels are getting all tucked up into there, which is gonna be part of it. Let me try to just connect 2 points here. There we go. There we go. Okay. And we'll get in the ramp truck. All right, well, first gear should be very, very short, and it is. Let's get into second. Third. Yeah, that's, that's feeling kind of right. Cool. I think this is a pretty successful first test. We got to get the bed working. I'll do a little bit more suspension tweaking, but I think we're pretty close. Very happy with that. One thing I've never been able to do in real life is like just absolutely drop the clutch in first gear because I don't want to shatter the drive shaft and a lot of expensive stuff I can't replace. Someday when I'm not a poor man, I'm going to do that in real life. All right, well, here we are in Beam, and now we have our ramp truck with some Beam modifications in order to have a working bed. It's not what I would say is perfect, but I'm happy with it. I'm really quite pleased with how it turned out, and now it's time to have some fun and do some things with this truck that I would never dare do in the real world. And I think we start out with, I don't know, some actual testing. Let's see if we can load a car on here and actually tow it around, because that's something we've never been able to do before. So this is a 200BX that I modified in Beam to more represent my personal car. Let's see how this goes. This car is a little bit too low. In fact, I highly doubt that it's going to clear those wheel wells, but we'll see how this goes. Well, we're on here. Let's see. We're on a little crooked, but I'll be honest, most times I load the car, it's a little crooked. It does indeed damage the wheel wells because it's too low. I suppose I could be thorough and raise the car up so that it actually fits. Alright, well, I was a good boy and I went ahead and raised it up a little bit. It still interferes a touch, but you know what? It's on there. So let's drive this thing around and see what it's like. Okay, so in the real world, I drive this truck unless we're on a hill starting in second gear, so kind of treating it like a dogleg transmission. It's not exactly what it is, but it's how you can treat it. Alright, yep, just a little bit of clutch slip there and you can get going. Now I'm curious if this car will actually stay on the bed, or if it's gonna wander around. Oh, it did wander a little bit in the back. Alright, third gear. Performance-wise, I would say it feels a little sportier than in real life, but that could just be the illusion of the field of view. Obviously, you don't drive in third person in real life. Unfortunately, the driver cam, I forgot to move it to the left side, so it does work, but you're driving from the center. Easy fix. I can fix that another time. But we'll drive from third person view for today. Let's get on the highway here. Let's see if we can get up to highway speeds. 65 is about the most I like to run the truck anyway. And you'll pretty much get there in fourth gear. And then put it in fifth and just sit there at very little RPM. Alright, stay in your lane now. Stay in your lane. Alright, 61. Okay. Now this does happen where you'll be foot to the floor, 100% throttle, losing speed in overdrive, and you'll have to go down to fourth. So that does feel accurate, we'll say. There we go. Actually, it is kind of just losing speed there in fifth gear. You kind of need to roll in fourth, so maybe our performance is a bit lacking. But it will just roll along here. Alright, well, I think we've demonstrated that it works like we've... Remember how I said I've demonstrated that it works? I think we just blew a tire. Alright, well, we've proven somewhat that it works more like a real ramp truck than anything we've ever experienced before in any video game, I would say. So now let's try to do some things that, well, I would just never dare do in the real world. You know, that's not too bad for something that probably weighs 9,000 pounds and only has 250 horsepower. And of course, we also need to know, I don't think this question's ever been asked, but I'm going to ask it right now. Would it drift? Come on. Well, the car in the back's drifting. I was gonna say we had some mounting issues with our car. Oh, it was attached to something. Ooh, I've got the car attached pretty strongly to try to keep it on there, but it is not too happy about that. So, let's try and see. We gotta find this out. That was pretty good. We're getting there. All right, this should be a good turn for it. Cool. It's not drifting if you don't tap a wall. I gotta say, it initiates pretty good. We got a little drag going. Hey, there we go. That might be enough for like a screenshot. Oh, we just ripped the axle out of it. It would appear trying to attach the wheels to it is not the right move. All right, we've reattached to the body here. It's funny, in the real world, attaching to the wheels is kind of the ideal way to go. It's one of the more secure things you can do, or attaching around the tires. In Beam, the physics are not too pleased with that. All right, let's just try to test one more wacky thing that I would definitely never try to do. Let's see what the top speed of Jesse would be with a car on it. Oh, stay on there, Virtual Red. Just stay on there. Here we go. I'm thinking 110. 110's the speed in my head. It might be more like 70, who knows? All right, we're not really gaining a lot. We are just now at 70, but we're going uphill, so maybe this downhill section is going to help us out. Here we go. Here we go. Up at maximum power. Screw staying in our lane. You can do it. You can do it. Honestly, this is fair. I think if I put my foot to the floor, around 80 is probably the best we could ever do. We are quickly running out of road. Oh, remember that drifting I was talking about earlier? Oh, this is gonna end in disaster. Well, okay, not so bad, not so bad. It was a pretty smooth drift until it wasn't. I gotta say, it took that hit to the wall with a lot of stride, and now we're creeping up on 90 miles an hour, exiting the tunnel. Might be some elevation helping us here, but we won't talk about that. Can we hit 100? 100 would be a huge victory, I feel. Especially if we slap the wall. 96, 97. Does the tunnel ever end? Oh, there's a turn. 98. Oh, it's over. Oh, we're through. Oh yeah, that's gonna do it. There is also, of course, the question of, could you use the ramp truck as a ramp? Yes, you can, if you lower the back enough. All right, well, let's end this madness off with one last test. Thank you for watching. Thanks for sticking with us if you're still here. If you are here, put a comment down below on what you think Jesse would run in the quarter mile. I'm gonna say 18.5. Let's see. Starting second. Ooh, a little bit of wheel spin there. I'm surprised. Oh, this is way quicker than I thought. I mean, it's not fast. but we might be in like the 16s. Let's see. Across the line. I thought it used to come up on the board. 16,740. Did you guess correctly? I bet you someone got close. Thanks again for watching. If this is something you want to see more of, let me know.